are united in diversity. We are very heterogeneous in our opinion.
We are doing this in our open democracies. Discussion is all open and loud, and I'm not for that.
What is European Union? What is freedom? How we learn together.
The obvious question is, what is the EU doing? What is our plan?
Welcome back. So if there's one takeaway from all these AI discussions, it's that innovation is happening fast, both in labs and on the ground. Europe's digital health age may well be here. Europe's health R&D scene is buzzing with breakthroughs in cancer, in imaging, and AI. But the pressure is on to attract talent, to translate discoveries from the lab to the bedside, and bring investors along. Our next session zooms out to explore how to turn these innovations into real-world impact. And there'll be a Q&A segment, so don't be shy. Here's Politico health reporter Rory O'Neill and experts to discuss this, so give them a warm welcome.
Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Rory O'Neill. I'm a health reporter at Politico. And this morning we are talking about innovation. How can Europe promote the innovations it needs for a healthier society and deliver to the people who need them? It's a huge question, but we have three quite different and very interesting perspectives to help me out. So let me introduce you to our panel. We have Ewout van Ginneken, Director of the European Observatory on Health Systems and Policies. We have Peter Arlett, Head of Data Analytics and Methods Task Force at the European Medicines Agency. And we have Federica Zanca, Program Manager for Medical Imaging and AI in Healthcare at the European Innovation Council. Thank you all so much for joining me. As Sarah said, we will hopefully have time for Q&A at the end, so please do start thinking about questions. For now, Federica, can I start with you? You've got particular vantage points on this from the European Investment Council. You have a budget to support innovation in the EU, so I think you've got an interesting vantage point on this. Maybe you can sort of outline what's kind of actually happening at the moment in terms of research trends. Like, what areas are attracting investment? How much money are we talking? Yeah, maybe you can set the scene for us that way.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. So what I want to say is that certainly healthcare is one of the most dynamic area when it comes to the equity funding at the European Innovation Council. We see that health covers about 41% of the investment across several verticals, about 10 verticals. And of this, I think we invested more than 300 million in medtech companies and about 200 in biotech company, million in biotech company, and in total I think we have about 300 SMEs on which investors have put money, meaning that the fund is always attracting leading investors together with us. So we are not only putting money alone, but we attract other investors. So we have a multiplication factor of about 4, 3.5, 4, depending. And if we look at the area where the most money are put, I think some have already been mentioned this morning, definitely AI in healthcare, digital platform. We do have also quite some money put in advanced material applied to healthcare, specifically when it comes down to sensors for implantable devices, for example. A lot goes also in implantable devices for cardiovascular diseases, and of course a lot of topic also in biotech, which I don't cover, but like gene therapy and so on. So a lot happening there. If we match this to what is happening at the European level, of course I forgot oncology, I think we are pretty much covering what the most trends are at European level, I mean outside of the European Innovation Council. What is, however, an important question is, are these matching the reality? Is there an uptake of that? But that's something we might want to discuss later, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's great, thank you. I mean, there's some areas where there's obviously huge unmet medical needs, and we hear quite a lot about we're not getting the innovations we want, that we need, rather, as fast as we need them. I'm thinking of something like women's health. Like, would you be able to like give us like what's happening in that area?
So women's health, like a bit of preventive, is a bit, I would say, underrepresented in our portfolio, because a lot of the R&D projects are in treatment, diagnosis, and follow-up, if you want. So there are opportunities there. So in terms of women's health, we are trying now to pick up that, and we have worked on some topics, and we would like to bring forward some initiative next year, because definitely there is absolutely not enough funding going there. And at the same time, I also think that in other areas like preventive medicine, we would need to, I mean, we have an opportunity to do better, because as I said, we focus on treatment and diagnosis, and that's what comes up from the bottom, okay, bottom up. So top down, I think preventive medicine, precision medicine, women's health, inflammatory, these are also areas where there is a big need that needs to be addressed. Of course, as I said, this would match what you call the unmet needs. And when we look at this innovation, we not only have to look at the unmet needs, but also we have to look, is the market ready to adopt this solution? Because we have a problem there, honestly, also in terms of investment. Do we have the right regulation? For example, I do have in my portfolio projects which are developing tools which are at the same time medicine, so treatment, but also diagnosis, so theranostics. There are no regulation today which are ready to bring this type of product to the market, because these are the cross of the disciplines, and that's a bit of an issue. So I think there we do have a lot of opportunities to better balance the portfolio, and at the same time to assess what the unmet needs are and what the landscape can digest.
Peter, Federica's set out some of the main trends that she's seen there. How does that compare to what you're seeing at the European Medicines Agency? What are the growth areas at the moment? What are the trends in European research that you're finding most interesting?
So we are responsible for medicines. We oversee the development, the authorization, and the supervision of medicines. So we're seeing medicines. Your last comment about the interface between medicines and devices and in vitro diagnostics is an interesting one, and it'll be very interesting to see the legal proposals coming from the Commission in the coming months to see if that interface can be made smoother, if you like, because I acknowledge that there have been challenges in terms of interpretation and meeting multiple requirements. In terms of what we're seeing a bit of everything. What there is great in innovation more generally, we are seeing a lot of work going into artificial intelligence. I know it was the last session, so I won't spend too much time on it, but EMA will be hosting a 2-day workshop tomorrow and Friday on artificial intelligence throughout drug development, authorization, and on market. And what's really interesting, because we've been doing this annually over the last few years, we've moved from what we might be doing in the future to what we are doing now. And there's also a big focus on what patients and patient groups are doing, because the great thing about large language models is it democratizes, in a way, artificial intelligence and different groups. It's not just the technology companies who are developing tools. Patients are developing things to help themselves, if you like. A lot of interest in better, smarter, and faster clinical trials. So clinical trials are the bedrock of clinical evidence, and clinical evidence is the bedrock of getting a product on the market. In other words, demonstrating that it's safe and effective. there has been a lot of discussion about a reduction in clinical trials in Europe. In fact, if you look at the data carefully, there isn't a reduction in clinical trials in Europe, but there isn't the growth that some other regions are seeing. So US and China in particular have seen a significant growth in clinical trials. Europe has seen a flat line, if you like. And so therefore, at a policy level, there's huge interest in trying to stimulate more clinical trials and therefore more investment in research and development within the EU. Lots of things going on. So firstly, the clinical trials regulation. So we have just gone through a rather painful transition from the old system to the new system. And that's rather dominated the narrative, if you like. But we're now seeing the benefits start, the rewards are starting to be reaped, if you like. So you can make one application for a clinical trial in 30 countries with one form, if you like. Now that is a game changer in terms of administrative burden and ease of getting a clinical trial, a multinational clinical trial started. Because of this need to stimulate growth, we have partnered up with the Commission and with the heads of all the national agencies to try and promote clinical research in Europe. Our initiative is called Accelerating Clinical Trials in the EU, or ACT-EU. And that really is an engine room for innovation and for making things better. Couple of examples. We have set targets for more and faster clinical trials in Europe. So we have made public targets, 500 more multinational clinical trials within 5 years. So that's 100 extra per year. Interestingly, some people say that's over-ambitious and others people say it's not ambitious enough. We shall see. And if it looks like it was under-ambitious, we'll just up the target next year and again the following year. The other thing we want to do is get clinical trials enrolling patients more quickly. At the moment, only 50% of clinical trials start enrolling within 200 days of the clinical trial application. We want to take that up to 66% over the coming years. And we think it's feasible with the right policy efforts and tools. Just one last example, and that's very practical and it's rather nice. It's called the trial map. We've used a kind of Google Maps type technology, and it means that a patient can search on their disease in their local area on a map and find out which clinical trials are recruiting for them locally. And then with one click, they can get through and get the contact details of the investigator. That is a game changer compared to the situation now where patients would have no idea how to access a clinical trial which might have a life-saving treatment for them. One last point on clinical trials would be the Biotech Act, which I think was discussed somewhat yesterday. We understand from the public statements from the Commission that it's coming. We know they intend to make clinical trials at centre stage in terms of their policy choices. So I think watch this space because we will all be aligned to make our research and development investment in Europe accelerate.
No, well, listen, let's get into that. I mean, because that's obviously one of the biggest policy stories in EU health at the moment. I mean, it sounds like there's lots of things from what you're saying about the system that work quite well. But Commissioner, like to hear Commissioner Verhelyi tell it, he says it's huge problems, too much red tape, too slow, too burdensome. You work with the system, like you see it up close. Yeah. Like, how burdensome is it? Do you understand the Commissioner's urgency to move on it? And I won't ask you to write the Biotech Act, but what kind of changes from your work do you foresee that could make things easier?
Yeah. So there is a problem statement. And if you're making a proposal for change, classic change management, you start with a problem statement. So it doesn't surprise me that the Commission is emphasizing that problem statement. The clinical trials regulation as written 10 years ago is quite prescriptive, quite rigid. There's very little risk proportionality. The rules have to be followed, if you like. And the problem statement is that one size shouldn't need to fit all, if you like, and you should have a more flexible approach. Also, there's timelines built into the clinical trials regulation, and the system is kind of built to go to the maximum timeline. Even though it could be faster, the reality is it doesn't go faster. And I think that, from the feedback we've had from stakeholders, is one area. They want these authorizations processed more quickly so they can start to recruit patients. Now, the Commission, in terms of what will be in the Biotech Act, will have to wait until it's published. However, there has been public consultation from the Commission, so we know some of the things they're considering. And centre stage is faster authorization, much faster authorization, perhaps a halving of the amount of time that it's currently taking to authorize, which will require regulatory authorities and ethics bodies to reorganize, perhaps even to strengthen. It'll require us at the EMA, because we run the information technology for the system, to modernize and amend that technology. But I'm sure we can do it. And I would say that's probably the central policy option that seems to be being considered.
Okay. Eva, a slightly different perspective on this. I mean, like, my question for you is, what kind of innovation do we need? Because when we're talking about innovation, I think we're usually thinking about clinical trials, medical devices, biomedical innovation. You're an expert in health systems, health policy, and I was wondering, what do you think is the potential for innovation in the design of health systems? How big of a part of the story?
Yeah. No, thank you for that question. I think I pick it up a little bit where you left it, also because in healthcare and eventually the adoption of the technologies and the medicines you talk about is of course also depending on the public purse and the ability of a system to cover it and then also actually deliver the new, maybe advanced therapies that also require infrastructure that not every country has. So I think that's something you need to look at first. And then of course, and that's why I also would like to talk about the redesign of systems. Of course, you also need to acknowledge that new technologies, whether it's a new pharmaceutical or AI, can put pressure on public budgets, and we have huge challenges there. So every money we spend or invest, from the public systems to uptake new technologies, we need to really think carefully whether there is an opportunity cost to invest somewhere else. Also, to perhaps disinvest in those areas or those therapies that are known not to work. So we have a whole framework on low-value care that helps you identify these treatments, and then you can try to disincentivize them, or maybe even take them out of the public benefit packages before you start to add something new. And if you add something new, maybe also on the condition that if it doesn't work, funding will also stop, or coverage in the system. And it's true that what we're perhaps forgetting here in the sometimes we focus, when we think innovation, we think pharmaceuticals or biomedical innovation, which I think traditionally has been really strong and well funded. Now more and more also technologies and AI and all the possibilities it gives us. But we also need to think indeed of the redesign of systems. Sometimes we forget to do the basics, to first look at the system as a whole, at the allocative efficiency of the system. Do you perhaps have a bloated hospital sector? Could you do much more in primary care? There are huge, vast differences between countries still on how they deliver care. How do you keep people outside of hospitals? How do you manage people at home? Those are the kind of innovations that we need to think of. How can we work better with the social sector? Social prescribing as a way to maybe help people who don't have a clinical problem but do show up at their GP to help them have their life needs met, for example, if it's a financial issue they're facing, or there are things like walking groups or knitting classes, but also help from with having a roof over your head. We have all kinds of good examples of integrated care projects that are really very, I would say, innovative in itself, and they have trouble scaling up. And I think that is also, something you will see with technologies or medicines, that we have something. How do we then scale it up? Well, especially difficult if there's also an element where the infrastructure is missing. So we will have inevitably perhaps differences between countries in how well they are able to uptake the new technologies. And I think that is a point of concern that we have to keep in mind, and perhaps also the Commission can play a role there, exactly there, to make sure that if there are gains made in those countries that are a little bit ahead, that we can also make sure that the others will also benefit from it eventually. But I think that we still will have to make decisions per country on where to invest. And it may well be simple innovations in the health system and how we deliver healthcare in a more patient-centered, holistic way.
In terms of like promoting the innovation that we want, do you think Europe spends too much time worrying about incentives for the private sector to innovate and maybe too little time just funding research? Like, it's been a theme at our summit for like 2 years now, so I won't labor the point on the significance assigned to the Draghi report and the fervor for competitiveness that runs through all of it seems to run through policy circles when we're talking about this whole area. But I mean, for example, one reason that Draghi flagged for why Europe is falling behind in research is that we just don't spend enough on innovation. I mean, do you think Europe's innovation model over prioritizes private incentives?
Well, that's not an easy question. I don't think it does, but I do believe there is more scope for, public spending also on innovation, as we've seen examples in the Netherlands and also Spain, I believe. And especially in those areas of the health system where people are left behind, people with rare diseases, for example, I think is an area where we could really step in, and also, definitely a role for the Commission is there. So I would not say, we're spending too much there, but we need to get the balance right, and we need to look into this, and not just from that perspective of, helping maybe people with rare diseases, but also as a resilience measure, also to make ourselves fit for, any shock that may happen to our systems in the future that I surely don't hope will happen, but we know how vulnerable we have been, to shocks to the international system of trading in terms of, medicines not reaching Europe and then having, shortages. I think you also need to think of that as a way to, protect and make your health system more resilient.
Federica, I'm going to come back to you because we spoke a little bit yesterday morning in our panel on the future of life sciences about the workforce issue and the amount of high-skilled labor that Europe needs to fuel its ambitions in the life sciences. Can you tell us what skills are most in demand and where are the shortages maybe?
So I think there are two aspects of this. So the first is indeed that the skills are definitely highly specialized people, but that need to be at the border of cross disciplines. What do I mean with that? I think already this morning in the discussion, in the panel discussion before us, the Canadian lady, sorry, I forgot her name, she mentioned that, sometimes you bring things to the market that people simply cannot use. Why? Because they don't meet a need. Second, they are not user-friendly. So I'll give you an example. Engineers who develop or data scientists who develop AI tools, for example, in radiology. They go and talk to the clinician when it is time to pilot or to install. And that's too late, and that's really too late. Why? Because then they develop something that is not fitting what is necessary. So what is needed are profiles which can, on one side, know the science, but at the same time that are able to talk the language of the clinician, that are able to, for example, understand the regulatory pathway from the beginning. For example, we have a lot of projects that develop, breakthrough technologies, and from day one, I tell them, you need to start thinking about your regulatory pathway. Because we heard it this morning, in Europe, it's very safe, performance is important, and at the same time, it's quite a burden to get, for example, the CE mark. So I think the aspect of multidisciplinarity of, for example, creating also at European level infrastructures which can train the workforce of tomorrow, developing and using tools which we are not used to do. I think one of the causes, it's not the major one, but it's one of the causes why, for example, adoption of AI in radiology, which covers 70% of the AI in healthcare, one of the reasons why it is not adopted is that clinicians fear that they lose their job. So we need to train the clinician to understand data, to understand the model, to bring their insight to the black box. And at the same time, we need to learn the developers to understand and speak their language. So infrastructure for training, I think, would be very welcome as well.
I think you both want to come in there. Peter, we'll go for you first.
Yeah, just very quickly. So from a pharmaceutical company medicines regulator point of view, I think firstly we should just acknowledge that Europe is great on skills, actually. We've got world-class universities, outstanding universities, both for training people but also for conducting research. And Europe is also great on ideas and invention. Not always so good about taking invention to market, if you like, so the scale-up part, and I'll come back to that in a second. Very concretely, what skills do we need? Well, we need medicine, and we need chemistry, and we need biotechnology, engineering, we need statistics, mathematics, data science, coding, and those are all specialists, but then we need absolutely everyone to have literacy in artificial intelligence because it's affecting all of our lives, whether it's in WhatsApp, it's in Google, it's everywhere, and it's going to start becoming so ubiquitous in our jobs that we need to know what we're doing, how to get the greatest benefit with the prompts we put in, but also how to do it safely and what not to share and so on. So I think everybody needs a crash course in AI literacy.
I just wanted to finish the three things. So the other thing that I wanted to say is that there is another important aspect that we should not neglect, and it is de-skilling. So if on one side you talk about training people to become AI, to increase AI literacy, which I think is extremely valuable, and that's why I talk about infrastructure also for that. At the same time, we should make sure that we do not lose skills. I think, for example, in a surgery room, where more and more robots are operating, or they support the surgeon. So it's very important that a new generation learn to use this tool, but that they are also able to still do a surgery if the robot doesn't function. And that's something that I think we should not forget. Sorry.
I think it's a very, very good point you're making, that these technologies in non-expertise hands are dangerous.
Yes.
So you need to still have the skills. So I fully agree. Fully agree also with all that has been said, that it has to go both ways, right? The developers need to speak the language more of the people delivering the care, and the people, the health workforce also needs to be skilled. Actually, we published a brief on closing the skills gap and some plans how to do so, where we acknowledge and see the same problem. It's of course tough, and it needs good planning because we have a workforce that is overstretched. They need to be convinced that it's worth investing their time. They need to be supported also by the professional organizations and the providers, and also supported by national and perhaps even better European policies to support so. So I fully support that point.
I think we can take questions from the floor if anyone has any. I've also got some bright lights in my eyes, so if I don't see you, you can wave or just heckle me or something.
Maybe while waiting for the question, I can add one thing about the skills. So another thing that I see is, and here I'm focusing on SMEs, right, is the misalignment in discussion between investors, because here we are talking about investing in AI, and the SMEs CEO or CTO. So why do I say that? So the SMEs, they have a great innovation. They want to bring it to the market. It takes them 2 years to get a CE mark. They think, okay, this is a great milestone, and now, we can go to the market. In the eyes of the investor, CE mark equal selling. That's absolutely not the case. CE mark doesn't mean adoption at all. So one of the skills also that we need to work on is to learn these people to communicate, to explain to investors that the life cycle of a medical device or of a pharma is not the life cycle of a green technology, where you can expect return on investment in 5 to 7 years. If you look at the biggest innovation, look at the Apple Watch, it took 20 years to come to the market. So these are things where on one side we have again the literacy, because the CEO and the investors talks different language, but at the same time, and I come back to your first question, we have the problem of, is the pathway to bring this innovation to clinical practice ready? And there I think we touched this morning in the previous panel, I don't think we are. I think the science is, but the pathway is not yet there. The regulation is not up to date to breakthrough technology. Reimbursement paths are not there. We have an HTA regulation which should address also economic impact of this. I agree with you. If there are tools which are not bringing value, we should remove them from the market, and we should identify those who do have an impact. And I do believe that not all AI health application will have a return on investment. Then you can discuss if, yes, but they do have a clinical benefit for rare disease and therefore still worth it. But these are considerations. And in all this, I do think we miss also skills to be able to talk to each other. So regulator, which understand innovator, innovator, which understand investors, and the triangulation of the three.
Yeah, I would add to that also public funders.
Yeah.
Because it's the same what I hear from you, what investors perhaps have a relatively short-term idea of wanting to get investments back. We see the same also in health systems, that often there's not enough time for these innovations, whether they are medical or technological or a new policy, to be given the time to really start to work. And that is a huge challenge as well there.
And possibly what can help there, I think, is also public-private partnership. I think innovation procurement, public-private partnership, where we bring, I would say, solution already in the test bed. And that's why perhaps the TEF facilities, the Apply AI strategy are trying to go in this direction, to bring the two worlds closer.
I think I will ask you all maybe to sum up the different divergent strands we've been talking about, see if we can bring it all back together. I'll ask each of you, what do you think is the biggest obstacle to Europe achieving its research potential? And can you give us an idea, what is the most important thing? I know panelists hate being asked to choose one thing, but what's the most important thing that Europe needs to do to overcome that obstacle? Eva, do you want to start with you, and we can move down the line?
Well, that's a hell of a question, of course. It's huge. No, yes, you know that we published this book on how to adopt innovations, where we really look at the processes to do so. And well, I think that we need to align better. I think that what comes really comes across very clearly here is that we need to talk each other's languages much better, so that whether it's an investor, developer, a provider, but also the public purse, that we all manage to talk to each other and take away the barriers that are there. I mean, it sounds very simple, but it's in practice really hard to do. And I think that is where it starts, that we have a good common vision is always the start of a transformation and a change process. And I think that is still missing.
Peter?
So you've used the word vision, Ewout, which reminds me that the vision of the European Medicines Agency is a fast path from innovation to safe and effective medicines. And I think it's quite a nice vision in the context of our discussion today. I don't think it is such a difficult question. I think the answer to me is clear. We should work as a single market, as the EU, because fragmentation makes the market more difficult. It makes it more difficult to get innovation to healthcare systems. So I say let's work more at European level, supported by and working with the member states, but let's avoid at all cost fragmentation. And the last thing is to have ambition. We spend a lot, it's perhaps part of the European psyche to be self-critical. I think we can do it. We have such a good academic base. We have such good invention. We have good regulation. Let's all work together at European level to get from that to innovation reaching patients.
And Frederic.
Amen.
Nice.
So
okay.
just to add, I think I want to say that indeed I completely agree. For example, fragmentation. If you think about the companies, they have to go through each single country when they want to bring a product to the market, from ethical approval to reimbursement. So I fully agree with you. Let's be ambitious, and let's work together to avoid fragmentation. I think we do have the power to do better, and I believe we will.
Thank you so much. We are just about out of time. Thank you so much to my speakers. Please give them a round of applause. And I will hand back over to my colleague Sarah, but I will see you later for the afternoon session on climate change. Thank you very much.